Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Hello and good afternoon. Welcome back to the latest episode of Musical Musings. We air this program to you every Wednesday at 1 p.m. and we broadcast it from Rajmakon, University of Technology, Peranakan. I will be bringing this program to you in two parts. For the first part, I will introduce a song to you and the performer or band artist that performs it. And we will talk about the main themes of the song, in other words, what it's all about, as well as discuss the band a little bit, just to give you some background about them. Again, the band or the artist. In this case, it will be a band for this week. Then, we will listen to the song and analyze the lyrics. The lyrics are the words to the song, and that's what we will do in the second half of the program. We will look at anything that is difficult to understand. Any slang, idioms, difficult vocabulary, anything like that that may be hard to understand. We will talk about that as we go through the words to the song in the second half of our program. And then, after that, we will finish up our program and we will have the news and the latest updates from the university, as always. Welcome, everyone. My name is Gary Gray, and I am your host for the Musical Musings program. I'm an American English teacher here at Rajmakon, University of Technology, Peranakan. I have been teaching here about 7 to 8 years now, over 7 years, and I do like to include music into my classroom setting as much as I can, as I think it's a pretty good teaching tool for listening, for lyrics, and for vocabulary, things like that. So, naturally, it only makes sense that I will bring to you a music program. So for today's program, we are going to be going over the song Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds. All right, so who are the Byrds? Okay, so first of all, I should tell you that the name of the band, the Byrds, is spelled B-Y-R-D-S. This was just them being clever. Byrds is normally spelled B-I-R-D-S in English. Okay? So I want to make sure you know that, so that if you like this song, you look up the band, you want to find more music by them, you need to search it right. It's B-Y-R-D-S. The Byrds. All right, so a little bit about the Byrds. They were formed in 1964 in Los Angeles, California. So they're an American band. Mostly, like the main time that they performed was about 1964 to 1973. So about 10 years there, 10 years, something like that. That was their main time frame. They did come back twice a little later on, but they only stuck around for a couple years or less even. I think their last time they got back together was I want to say 2000, and they were only together for less than a year. I mean, they only did like a couple of concerts, and that was it, and that was the end of it. And they were together before that as well. They had two kind of reunions. They were together, I want to say, 89 to 90. Again, those years may not be right. I think that's right. Approximately, at least. At least it's close. But again, briefly. That's why I didn't really take notes on it, write it down. It was very brief time that they were back together. So basically, after 1973, that was it. As I said, they did briefly get back together. So if you went online and you searched for them, sure, given how much more common videoing was in the 80s and 90s, and especially the 2000s, although for most of the 2000s they were already gone. Like I said, I think 2000 was their last year together, their last reunion, I think. But given how common recording was then, sure, you might go online and find a recording of the Byrds after 1973. Yes, that's very possible. But basically, that was the end of it for them. 1964 to 1973. So about 9 or 10 years. That's how long they were together. One of the interesting things about them, in terms of who was in their band, they had in their band David Crosby. I don't know how much you remember our older episodes or how much you like kind of old style Western music. So I don't know if you'll recognize that name, David Crosby. But we did a song a while back, many months ago. I try not to repeat. I try not to repeat the same group or the same band or the same artist. We've done that a couple times. We've repeated a couple of them a couple times. And since we've been doing this program for almost a year and a half now, we're going to start doing it again, where we pick a second song from some of the better artists. But so far, I try to make sure we switch it up. We only have one song per artist so far. Again, mostly. We have a couple artists where we've repeated them. So I'm not sure exactly when it was, because we've only done one song by them. Because again, I try not to repeat the artist. But at some point, many months ago, we did a song by Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Or Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. Sometimes Neil Young would perform with them, so I don't remember what song we did, so I don't know if it was Crosby, Stills, and Nash or Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. I don't know if Young was with them. They performed either way. But the point is, David Crosby. That is the David Crosby of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. And the reason I want to make sure I point that out is because even though the Byrds were quite famous, pretty popular, around for 10 years, had several kind of big songs, most people who were into music at the time knew who they were. pretty impressive band, pretty popular. Everyone knew them. Still, not as big as Crosby, Stills, and Nash. So, it's interesting to note that this is where David Crosby kind of came from. This was pretty much his start. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, maybe he did a couple of other brief things before this. That would make sense anyway. You try a few things out, so he probably did. But basically, mostly, this was his first thing before moving over to Crosby, Stills, and Nash. All right, so that's David Crosby is in this band. So that's kind of a big deal. Honestly, he wasn't the lead singer. He wasn't the person that started the band. The person that started the band actually never got that famous. I mean, obviously famous with the Byrds, since the Byrds themselves were famous. So a little bit of fame for the person who started it. But I did not even write in my notes here who he is, because, yeah, even I myself, hosting this program, I like to think I know something about music. I don't know everything, that's for sure. But I like to think I know a little bit. Never heard of him. I've heard of the Byrds, of course, because I've heard of this song that we're going to do. Never heard of their lead singer. Beyond this. Beyond the Byrds or anything like that. So, and again, I don't mean that to take away from him. Obviously, he must have been quite good. The Byrds were popular. This song that we're going to do today hit #1 in the U.S. So, very popular song. I just mention it because he's not even their most famous band member. David Crosby is. Okay, so that's the Byrds. Again, 1964 to 1973. Had a couple of brief reunions, but basically 1973 was it. And the song that they did, that we're going to talk about today, is Turn, Turn, Turn. Turn, Turn, Turn. Now, I should point out that this is not their song. It's not originally by them. It's originally by Pete Seeger. I believe he actually wrote it. If I remember correctly, I think he wrote it. He certainly performed it first. But Pete Seeger's style was a little different, so he wasn't as popular. And I say that, you notice how I kind of hesitated saying that. That's because I actually really like Pete Seeger. And in fact, I'm trying to remember, we might have done an episode on him already. I think we have not yet. We're going to need to do one. But we may have. I think we didn't, but I could be wrong. Because I'm a big Pete Seeger fan, so I hesitate a little bit because it's like, oh, well, the Byrds are known for this. But I also don't want to take too much away from them just because it was written by Pete Seeger and it's first performed by Pete Seeger. Because you need to understand that the gap between the two isn't that long. Like Pete Seeger wrote it in 1959. And the Byrds did it in 1965. All right, I guess maybe that sounds like a long time. 6 years. Is it really? I mean, when you think about it being first written in 1959, that doesn't even mean that Pete Seeger first performed it in 1959. I'm actually not sure when he first performed it, but it could have been 60, 61, 62. And the Byrds didn't even form until 1964. So they couldn't do it before then. And they did it in 65. So it was performed, I think, even though you get kind of that big gap there, I would say it was performed shortly after it was written. Now, again, you could argue that because there's that 6-year gap in there, 6, even 7, what is it? Oh, 5, yeah, 5 or 6 year. 5 or 6 year gap in there. You could argue that, oh no, that was, the Byrds performed it way after it was written. Yeah, yes, you could make that argument, but to me, it's pretty close. I mean, the Byrds couldn't perform it before they were a band, right? So you can't perform it before 1964. That's when they formed. And again, like I said before, the year Pete Seeger wrote it is not necessarily the first year it was available to be performed. He might not have been done with it. He might not have published it. He might not have done it himself to make it available for everyone else. So you're talking about a song that maybe didn't come out till 60, 61, 62. I have no idea. I did not actually look that part up. But I do think, if I'm remembering correctly, that it was actually 1960 or later. So it's not even like it actually came out in 59 when Pete Seeger wrote it. All right, so my point is, no, this is not their song, but pretty close to it. The Byrds are the band that are known for performing it, and that's kind of my point about them doing it kind of very shortly after it was written. And that's why I got into that whole long conversation about when it was written, when they performed it, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Even though there seems to be that 6-year gap in there, I think they actually performed it pretty quickly. So it's pretty much their song. Again, not really. Pete Seeger wrote it. I love Pete Seeger, so give him all the credit. But as far as performing it, it's their song. It's the Byrds. All right, so again, they did this in 1965. The song is an interesting one because it pulls its lyrics almost directly from the Bible. From a book in the Bible called Ecclesiastes. And that book is I have to pause. I don't want to offend anyone, because people who are of that faith will say that, everything's written by God and And honestly, we don't know who really wrote a lot of the stuff, because it was compiled, put together by monks hundreds of years later. So let me just say that it is believed that this was written by Solomon. And why is that important? That's important because Solomon was viewed as being a very smart person. he was kind of who you would go to if you needed to solve a problem. In fact, there's a famous story about two women saying this baby belonged to them, and he said, well, then why don't you cut it in half and share it? Well, obviously you cannot do that with a baby, and that was his point. You need to settle your differences. You need to come up with a solution. You need to resolve this. We can't just divide everything in half because you're going to argue about it. No. We cannot cut the baby in half. No. So Solomon is viewed as one of the wisest people, one of the smartest people in the Bible. And this song is about how everything has its time. And so it's a very thoughtful song. So it fits. It's appropriate. All right, so that's enough background. It's a pretty short song, so the second half of our program will be pretty short. But why don't we get to the song now? So let's get to the song. All of you joining us on YouTube, you know how this works if you've joined us before. We will give you the link in the upper right-hand corner. Please click on that for the video for this song. And then you can click back to come back here. And for everyone else, if you're streaming or on the radio, we can play the audio, no problem. So you should not have a problem with this. So let's get to the song.
Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Okay, welcome back. That was Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds. And it's a pretty simple song about time and how, there's a time for everything. Now, when we say that, now even that saying might be a little confusing to you. So when we say there's a time for everything, we mean that there is an appropriate time to do something. There is a good time to do something. There's a right time to do something. For example, let's take a really bad situation. I can think of something in my own life. So I don't want to talk too much about it because it's my own life. But let me try to use it as an example. So something bad happened to a family member of mine. It was caused by another family member. But she did not intend or mean to cause it. In other words, the bad thing that she did to this person, she did not mean to do anything bad. Did not even think about it, really. Completely no. So, you probably don't want to mention that to this person that did the bad thing while the other person is still getting the consequences of that. Why? Because the person you're blaming is going to feel even more guilty. They already feel guilty. And it's not something they even did intentionally. In other words, on purpose. They meant to do it. No. They did not mean to do it. It was not intentional. Blaming them for it, even if it really is their fault, is probably not very helpful. So, in other words, that's not the time for it. Wait. If you think that person and how they influenced the situation was based on a bad decision they made, so in other words, they do have some blame, maybe you do want to bring that up eventually. Maybe you want to say it. Hold them accountable. Make sure they know what you think. Fine. But not then. Not at that point. Not right when that other person is suffering from whatever it is. So, you need to wait. That is not the time for it. And that's what this song is about. There is a time for everything. Okay, so let's get to the lyrics. It's a pretty short song. I mean, it's not shorter than a normal song, I guess, but they repeat the chorus several times, so that kind of makes it short. Okay, so we start out with the chorus. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, 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 and a time to every purpose under heaven. Okay, so I guess the most important thing here is the very name of the song. It's turn, not time. It's turn. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. What in the heck are they talking about with turn? Turning all the time. Okay, so I'll be honest with you. We sometimes have these songs where we don't know what the words mean. I don't know exactly what they're trying to say by that. Why are they using the word turn there? But here's what I think they're saying. We're talking broadly here. And what I mean by that is we're talking about kind of life and, the philosophy of how you live your life. So if you're talking about turning, you're talking about doing something, changing something, a turn in your life. You're talking about changing something. So what they're saying here is there's a time to make those decisions, to make those changes. It may not be now, but maybe it is. That's kind of what this song is about. You have to recognize when it's time for you to do something in your life, to make that change. And when they say there is a season, again, what does that mean? A season, that's like spring, winter, fall, summer. What do you mean there is a season, turn? When we say there's a season for something, it kind of means the same thing. It means there's a time for something. Except that just is kind of a picturing a longer time. So maybe this change that you have to make maybe takes more time. Could take you weeks or months. So there's a season for it. Basically means the same thing though. There's a time for it. So again, it's telling you to slow down. Think about it. It's not saying don't do it. No. There is a season for it. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. So there is a time to do it. Yes. Maybe you should. It's just saying, think about it. Make sure you make the right decision. Okay, we continue on. A time to every purpose under heaven. Okay, under heaven, in other words, with God, if you believe in that, which I know maybe a lot of people from Thailand may not, because our religions are different. This is based on Western religions with Christianity and God and Jesus and all that. So there's a God up there looking over us. So to a time up for every purpose under heaven. So in other words, we have a meaning for everything. So that kind of matches up with the time. You have to judge your time properly because there's a meaning for it. So you have to do the right thing at the right time. All right, so then we continue on. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, and a time to weep. Okay, so there's nothing really crazy about any of that. I think you understand most of those words. Born, die, plant, reap. Reap means when you collect your vegetables once they're done growing. Kill, heal, laugh, weep. Weep means cry. So these are just all opposites. That's all that is. There's nothing tricky here in the lyrics. Those are opposites. So there's a time for this, there's a time for that. That's all it's saying. Sometimes you need to be happy. Sometimes you need to be sad. That's all it's saying. Time to be born, time to die. Plant, reap. Kill, heal. Laugh, weep. We get the chorus again. And then the next verse is very much the same, where we have these opposites. Time to build up. Time to break down. Time to dance. A time to mourn. A time to cast away stones. A time to gather stones together. Okay, so those last two there, cast away stones and gather stones together. What does that mean? I'll be honest with you. Those are a couple of those lines where you don't really know what they mean. I mean, cast away, when you talk about casting something away, you're talking about throwing it away. So you're throwing the stones away, or a time to gather the stones together. But what does that really mean? Honestly, I'm not sure it's even supposed to mean anything. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing it. Again, sometimes these song lyrics, not clear. But here's why I say I don't think it means anything. It's because all we're talking about is opposites. Cast away stones, gather them together. Cast away, gather together. It's opposite. That's all it is. Once again, it's saying sometimes you need to be happy, sometimes you need to be sad. Sometimes you need to cooperate to work out a problem. Sometimes you need to be strong and force a solution because this is the right way to do it. Sometimes if someone does something wrong, maybe it was done innocently. It was a mistake. So sometimes you need to be nice and understanding. Sometimes maybe they did it not very nicely. It's on purpose to hurt you. Maybe you need to react more harshly to that. You need to be more firm. Confront them. I don't want to say you should attack them. That's probably not good. That's just going to make it worse. But, go after them to some degree, at least, to resolve it. So sometimes you need to be nice. Sometimes you need to be more aggressive. And that's all it's saying, I think, there. Cast away stones, gather stones together. The opposite. All right, we have the chorus again, and then we have another verse, which is much the same. A time to love, a time to hate. A time of war, a time of peace. A time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. Again, all just opposites. The only thing I want to address there is maybe the word embrace might be a hard word for some of you, maybe. It just means hugging someone. So there's a time to hug and a time to refrain from hugging. Again, you may kind of think about that one and say, well, when would be a time to refrain from embracing? Well, again, think about when someone makes you mad. There are times when, they made you mad, but it was just a mistake. You need to forgive them. Give them a hug. Sometimes someone does that, makes you mad. It wasn't a mistake. They did it out of anger and malice and meanness. Maybe you shouldn't just forgive them like that. Eventually, I would hope you could forgive them just because that's best for everyone eventually, sometime, someday. But maybe not right away. So, there's a time to refrain, which means don't do it, from embracing. Okay? We get the verse again, the chorus again, and one last verse. A time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time for love, a time for hate, a time for peace. I swear it's not too late. Okay, so not much there either, all opposites. I will say this in case you don't know this word. You may not know the word rend. It is a weird word because we use like render. The way the meaning of that word almost seems like the opposite of rend, and it's not, but kind of sort of almost is, and they're not supposed to be opposites since they have the same kind of root word, the same base word, which is rend, which is what we're using here. So that word's a little confusing. And what I mean is that render kind of means create. When you render something. We use that a lot with like letters, numbers, drawings. It means you're putting something on paper. You're creating it on the paper. You're rendering it. To rend something without the ER means to tear it, rip it. So you're kind of destroying it. It almost means the opposite of render. It's a little bit weird. But just understand that, because rend means to rip something, and it says a time to rend, a time to sew. So again, we're talking opposites. Rend, tear apart, piece of cloth, and then a time to sew. Sew, put it back together. Simple as that. Opposites. All right, and that is pretty much the song. It's just a bunch of opposites. A time for this, a time for that, ba 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 ba, going back and forth with opposites. It's a very simple song, but it's a very good song in the sense that it has a pretty strong meaning. Because it's trying to tell you to kind of back up, take a big look at everything, and make the right decision. Sometimes you want to do this. Sometimes you want to do that. These two things could be completely opposite. So you need to be careful. You need to be careful to make the right decision. So it's actually a very thoughtful song. It's a very thought-provoking song. It's really just a very good song all around. All right, so that is the Byrds. Now, when we finish up all of these episodes, I like to tell you their different songs. Honestly, the Byrds don't have a really deep catalog of great songs. There are some. 8 Miles High. Go listen to that. Mr. Tambourine Man. Not their original song. Kind of like this one. Remember, this one is not their song. Turn, Turn, Turn is not their original song. But Mr. Tambourine Man, the Byrds, and Bob Dylan. Probably Bob Dylan's a little more famous for it, but the Byrds are second. So it's sort of thought of as their song. Kind of. It's more Bob Dylan's again. It's kind of Bob Dylan's song. But if you were to put a second band on it and say, oh, well, who sang this song? And you took a poll, yeah, most people are going to say Bob Dylan. Those that don't, though, most of them are going to say the Byrds. So Mr. Tambourine Man's another good one. So I'm not saying they have no other good songs to listen to. 8 Miles High, Mr. Tambourine Man. There are several others other than those two that are pretty good. I'm just saying they don't have this deep catalog. And the reason is, even though they were around for 9 or 10 years, you did have probably their best person leave. So Crosby, Stills, and Nash has a much bigger, better catalog of songs. And that's where David Crosby went to. So the Byrds lost him. And that's pretty much it for the Byrds. Alright, so they don't have a big catalog of great songs, but they do have some other good songs. I mentioned a couple to you, 8 Miles High, Mr. Tambourine Man, as well as Turn, Turn, Turn. So I recommend that you go listen to those songs. And they do have a bunch of other songs, which would kind of rank a little bit lower than some of these, but still quite good. So go give them a listen to. I always like to recommend my listeners go listen to these other bands, because I do try to focus on only one song from that artist, and then we'll do a different artist the next week. We've only had, I think, 2 or 3 artists that we've featured more than once on this program, and we've been doing it for well over a year. So check them out. They have other good songs. 8 Miles High, Mr. Tambourine Man, and there are others. Go check out the Byrds. All right. Thank you for joining us for today's Musical Musings program. Please stay with us. Make sure you tune back in next week for another great song. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Musical musings, musical